The land of Judah was dry. The once fertile fields now stretched in silence, cracked by the absence of rain and the cries of hunger. In Bethlehem, the house of bread, there was no more grain. Families gathered what little they had left, and the eyes of the children grew hollow, haunted by scarcity. The people murmured, prayed, fasted, but help felt far away. Hunger had become the sentence of a difficult season, and many began searching for answers beyond their homeland. It was in this context that Elimelech, a man from Bethlehem in Judah, made a decision that would change the course of his family's future. With his wife Naomi and their 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, he left the Promised Land and journeyed to the plains of Moab, a foreign land, home to another people, another culture, and other gods. It was an escape from famine, but also a step away from the inheritance of the Lord. Upon arriving in Moab, the family sought shelter and provision. At first, this new land seemed more fruitful. Bread returned to their table, and the sons, now grown, took Moabite wives, Orpah and Ruth. Time passed, but with time came tragedy. First, Elimelech fell ill and died far from his homeland. Naomi was left a widow, alone in a foreign land. The pain didn't stop there. After about 10 years, both of her sons also died. Grief settled in with an unbearable weight. Naomi, now without husband or sons, looked at Orpah and Ruth through eyes worn down by sorrow. 3 women, united by loss, with no inheritance, no future, and no direction. Then Naomi heard whispers. The Lord had visited his people and restored bread to the land. Judah was breathing again. The land they had left in a time of scarcity was now flourishing. And Naomi, broken but still breathing, decided to return. She rose to leave the fields of Moab, and her daughters-in-law followed her, at least for part of the way. Along the road, Naomi stopped. She turned to Orpah and Ruth and said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Go back. I have no hope left. The Lord's hand has turned against me." She blessed them, and she wept. It was a moment of parting. Orpah, through tears, kissed Naomi and left, but Ruth did not move. She clung to her mother-in-law with resolve. Her eyes did not flinch. Her words rose like a mountain. "Do not urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." Faced with such a vow, Naomi had nothing more to say. They walked in silence toward Bethlehem, 2 widows marked by loss, pressing forward against the wind. Their arrival caused a stir. The women of the town asked, "Is this Naomi?" But she answered with bitterness, "Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has afflicted me." They had returned during the beginning of the barley harvest. The fields were filling again, but Naomi saw no grain, only ashes, and yet beside her walked a foreigner, a woman who had left everything behind out of loyalty. Ruth was now part of her story, and through divine providence, she would become the key to a new season. There was no celebration, no gold. Only 2 women held up by an unspoken promise that even in seasons of grief and loss, the God of Israel does not forget those who turn back to him. Naomi's lament still echoed. But in the dried fields of her soul, God had already begun planting hope. The chapter of exile was closing. A new story was about to begin, and Ruth, the Moabite, was at its center. The sun had already risen over Bethlehem when Ruth, gripped by a sense of urgency and responsibility, decided to go into the fields to glean leftover grain. There was no other way to survive. A widow, a foreigner without wealth or name, she knew that only her willingness to act could bring food for herself and Naomi. According to the law of Israel, the Lord had commanded that the edges and remnants of the harvest be left for the poor, the orphans, and the widows. It was a gesture of divine justice in a land marked by contrast. Ruth clung to this window of mercy and with humility went out in search of provision. With each step through the fields, she bent low, gathered fallen grain, and quieted her hunger with labor. Unknowingly, her feet had brought her to the field of a man named Boaz. Boaz was a man of influence, a relative of Elimelech, Naomi's late husband. He was a man who feared God, respected among the elders, and owner of both land and honor. Arriving to oversee the harvest, Boaz noticed someone unfamiliar among those gathering at the edges of the field. Ruth's posture, attentive, respectful, tireless, caught his attention. "Whose young woman is this?" he asked the foreman. And the reply came, "She's the Moabite who returned with Naomi from Moab. She asked to gather behind the harvesters, and she's been working here from early morning without rest." Boaz approached her. His eyes did not judge her by her origin, but by her devotion. Gently, he said, "Don't go glean in another field. Stay here with my servant girls. I've warned the men not to touch you, and when you're thirsty, drink from the water the workers have drawn." Ruth bowed low, face to the ground. "Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should notice me, a foreigner?" Boaz replied with warmth and conviction. "I've been told all about what you've done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland to come live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." In that reply, Ruth received more than favor. She received identity, not as a Moabite, but as a daughter embraced beneath the wings of the Almighty. At mealtime, Boaz invited her to eat with the harvesters. Ruth sat among the workers. She was served bread, wine, and roasted grain. She ate until she was satisfied and even saved some leftovers. At the end of the day, she returned home carrying nearly an ephah of barley, about 20 kilos, an unusual harvest for a woman alone. When Naomi saw her, she was amazed. "Where did you glean today? May the one who took notice of you be blessed." Ruth told her about Boaz. His name slipped from her mouth, unaware of the connection, but when Naomi heard it, her eyes lit up. "Blessed be he by the Lord, who has not stopped showing kindness to the living and the dead. That man is our close relative, one of our family's redeemers." In that word, redeemer, lay a hidden promise. The law of Moses declared that if a man died without children, a close relative could marry the widow to carry on the deceased's name. It was more than marriage. It was restoration, dignity, redemption. Ruth continued gleaning in Boaz's fields throughout the entire barley and wheat harvest. She left early and returned late, sustaining the household with her hands and nurturing hope in quiet faithfulness. Among the stalks she gathered, she didn't yet realize she was collecting something greater. She was reaping destiny. Boaz, in turn, observed not just her quiet beauty or strength in labor, but her character. She didn't chase after young men. She sought no shortcuts. She honored her mother-in-law, honored the faith, and honored the ways of Israel. And that pleased Boaz's heart. God was beginning to intertwine their stories. The harvest was only the beginning. While the people celebrated the fruits of the field, a heavenly plot was being woven between husks and promises. Naomi, who once called herself bitter, was beginning to taste a new flavor. the hope that is reborn in the field where faithfulness meets favor. Ruth had arrived empty-handed. Now her arms were full, but she still didn't know that what mattered most was yet to come. For her Redeemer was not only giving her food, he carried the key to her redemption. And so, with steady steps and eyes fixed upward, Ruth became more than a foreigner. She became part of the story God would write with honor, legacy, and redemption. The harvest season came to an end. The once vibrant fields were now bare, but the barns were full. As any good landowner would, Boaz went to the threshing floor, the place where grain was separated from the chaff, to guard the fruit of his labor and ensure its safety. It was a night of work, but also of rest beneath the stars. Meanwhile, in the stillness of the modest home she shared with Naomi, Ruth listened closely to her mother-in-law's words. The older woman, who had once claimed to be bitter, now saw glimpses of a divine plan unfolding before her eyes. Guided by wisdom and courage, she instructed Ruth, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may go well with you? Boaz, with whose servant girls you've been, is our relative. Tonight, he will be winnowing barley at the threshing floor. Wash yourself, anoint yourself, put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not let yourself be known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking." Naomi's words were not ordinary. They were a call to action, a bold proposal, yet one fully supported by the law. As a widow, Ruth had the right to seek redemption, and Boaz, as a kinsman redeemer, could restore her name and her inheritance. But this would require faith and courage and complete surrender to the Lord's path. That very night, Ruth followed Naomi's counsel. She quietly went down to the threshing floor. Boaz had eaten, drunk, and now lay resting beside a heap of grain. The night was calm. The only light came from the stars. Without being noticed, Ruth approached. She uncovered his feet and lay down, an act of humility just as tradition instructed. At midnight, Boaz awoke, startled, and there, at his feet, was a woman. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice laced with surprise and caution. Ruth replied with steady grace, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your garment over me, for you are a redeemer." This was more than a plea for help. It was a request for covenant. Ruth was offering herself in marriage according to Levirate law, so that her late husband's lineage would not be erased from Israel. Boaz, a just and honorable man, once again recognized the virtue of the young woman before him. "Blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter. This last kindness is greater than the first, for you have not gone after young men, whether rich or poor. Now, my daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. Everyone in our town knows that you are a woman of noble character." But Boaz revealed a crucial detail. There was another man, one closer in kin, who, by law, had the first right to redeem Ruth. Still, Boaz would not shrink from responsibility. He would act with justice, with order, and with faith. "Stay here tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him redeem. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie here until morning." Ruth remained until daybreak, rising before anyone could recognize her. Boaz, with respect and discretion, asked that no one know she had come to the threshing floor. Before she left, he filled her shawl with 6 measures of barley, a symbolic yet generous gift. She returned home with her hands full and her heart even fuller with hope. When she arrived, Naomi was waiting. Her eyes, wide with anticipation, lit up as Ruth recounted everything that had happened. Naomi, with the wisdom of a seasoned soul, said, "Wait, my daughter, until you find out how this will turn out, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today." The seed had been planted. Now came the time of waiting. But not a restless waiting. It was the waiting of someone who knows that faithfulness yields eternal harvests. The Moabite, who arrived as a widow and foreigner, was now at the heart of a redemptive act. Boaz, the righteous one, would act, and heaven was watching every step. That night, between the husks and the grain, a quiet request was made, not out of ambition, but out of legacy, not from lack, but from purpose. The request for redemption had been placed, and Ruth's story was about to be sealed with a new chapter. Not one of loss, but of promise fulfilled. Morning broke over Bethlehem, heavy with anticipation. Ruth waited in silence, not only trusting Boaz, but trusting the God under whose wings she had come to take refuge. Boaz, for his part, did not delay. As soon as the morning settled, he went up to the city gate, the place where decisions were made, where covenants were sealed, and the people's matters judged. He sat among the elders and waited for the closer relative, the one who, by law, had the first right to redeem Elimelech's inheritance. When the man passed by, Boaz called to him, "Friend, come and sit here." And he sat. Then Boaz gathered 10 elders of the city, legal witnesses. The stage was set. The fate of Ruth, Naomi, and Elimelech's family line would be decided publicly in the presence of all. Boaz began, "Naomi, who has returned from the land of Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of those seated here. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me, so I will know." The man replied, "I will redeem it." But then Boaz revealed what was truly at stake. "On the day you buy the field from Naomi, you will also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the deceased, in order to preserve the name of the dead with his inheritance." Upon hearing this, the relative hesitated. He said, "I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I jeopardize my own inheritance. You redeem my right of redemption." The decision was sealed with an ancient custom. The man took off his sandal and gave it to Boaz, a sign that he was giving up his right to redeem. In the presence of the elders and all the people, Boaz declared with a firm voice that he had bought from Naomi everything that belonged to Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon, and that he had taken Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, to be his wife, so the name of the dead might be preserved through his inheritance. The people, gathered at the gate of the city, responded with blessings. "May the woman who is coming into your home be like Rachel and Leah, who together built the house of Israel. May your offspring be powerful in Ephrathah and renowned in Bethlehem." That union, born out of pain and obedience, was now celebrated as a symbol of restoration. Boaz took Ruth as his wife, not as a gesture of charity, but as the fulfillment of a divine purpose, and the Lord enabled her to conceive. The womb, once marked by the barrenness of grief, now carried life. Ruth, the Moabite, became a mother in Israel. From her union with Boaz came a son. And that child would be much more than a baby. He would be the bridge between the redemption of a family and the promise of a nation. The women of the city rejoiced with Naomi. "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you today without a redeemer. May his name be famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age." The child was placed in Naomi's arms, and she embraced him as her own. The same woman who once said, "Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara," now rocked the future in her arms. They named the boy Obed. He would be the father of Jesse, and Jesse would be the father of David, and from David would come the Messiah. The story of Ruth ended where many others only begin, with the birth of a son. But the name of that boy would echo for generations. The Moabite, the widow, the foreigner, now became part of the royal lineage. From her faithfulness, the line of the king would bloom. Redemption was sealed not only with a marriage, but with a name, a legacy, a new beginning. In the midst of harvests, grief, and bold steps, God wove a story that would defy time. And Boaz, the righteous, and Ruth, the faithful, became the root of an eternal promise. The boy grew up on the streets of Bethlehem, surrounded by Naomi's care, Ruth's love, and Boaz's honor. His name was Obed. At first glance, just another child born among the people, just another life in the natural course of existence. But no. Obed carried in his bones the weight of a silent miracle, the testimony of a story that began long before he was conceived, in the fields of Moab, between the tears of a widow and the determined steps of a foreign woman. In that lineage, glory hid behind simple acts, a decision not to abandon, a humble harvest, a night on the threshing floor, a redemption sealed at the city gate. But in the eyes of the Eternal, it was more than ordinary. It was fulfillment. It was part of a sacred thread weaving destinies together to point to something far greater than land, bread, or descendants. Obed grew and became the father of Jesse. Jesse grew and became the father of David, the shepherd who would become king, the one chosen after God's own heart. From David's line centuries later would come the anointed one, the promised son, the one whose coming was whispered by prophets and awaited by generations. Ruth, the Moabite, was grafted not only into Israel, but into the very root of messianic hope. The woman who once left her land, her people, and her gods now became part of the eternal promise of redemption. She could never have imagined that her story, marked by loss and faith, would become the foundation for the salvation of all nations. The book of Ruth ends with a genealogy, a list of names that to many might seem like nothing more than a record. But each name there is a living stone in an eternal structure. From Perez to David, the lineage follows a path of redemption. From Judah to Bethlehem, from sorrow to kingship, from mourning to praise. And in that ending, the greatest secret is revealed. True redemption is not only about recovering land, it's about restoring a name. Ruth was not only redeemed by Boaz, she was redeemed by God himself. Her story is a window into the heart of the Most High, a God who welcomes the foreigner, who honors quiet faithfulness, who turns widows into mothers of kings, and who writes his promise through the unexpected. Not a single tear of Ruth was wasted. Not a single step taken in faith went unanswered. Not a single harvest gathered in humility went unnoticed by heaven, because when man sees the ordinary, God sees the eternal. Ruth wasn't just David's great-grandmother. She was the silent shadow that pointed to the Messiah, and her story lives on in every act of loyalty, in every choice made by faith, in every heart that, like hers, says, "Your people will be my people, your God will be my God." And so the foreigner became family. The widow became a root, and the mother of Obed became an eternal symbol of the grace that reaches, transforms, and plants seeds that bear the fruit of salvation. If you've watched this far, type Amen in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and continue this journey with us. May Ruth's legacy keep inspiring hearts to trust, even when everything seems lost. God bless you.